Welcome back to The Real Story with Jeannie Ives. In studio with me today is Mary Kate Knorr. She's the Executive Director for Illinois Right to Life. In full disclosure, I am a board member for Illinois Right to Life Action, so I work with Mary Kate in a number of different ways. Mary Kate, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're having you on because this week is the anniversary, the one-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision that came down. And there's been a lot of changes nationally when you talk about the abortion debate. So we wanted to talk about those changes with you, specifically in the state of Illinois, but also in the nation at large. Now, when you look at it, there's really a divided nation on this topic. While you still have the majority of people in the entire country saying that they are pro-abortion, they want abortion with some limits. And so that's kind of the decision where things are being drawn. That's not the case in Illinois. Illinois, it's a free-for-all here. In fact, it's a growing industry. So let's start with that. Ahead of time, I do encourage people to read this article. It's a USA Today article. It came out June 4th, and it's pretty comprehensive. And it takes a look at one specific city in the state of Illinois named Carbondale. And I think that my technical expert, my assistant there, JP, can put that chart up and can kind of give you a visual of why Carbondale. So Mary Kate, why Carbondale? Why Carbondale is as the new center for abortion in the state of Illinois?
Yeah, as it turns out, Carbondale is sort of, it has an access point from pretty much every state on this side of the country. So, east of Texas, straight up, you can access Carbondale, Illinois through Amtrak specifically from every state in the nation for the most part, on that side of the nation. So that's really what they were looking at strategically when they decided we're going to start putting abortion providers in that state, Planned Parenthood affiliates specifically in that state, and partners with Planned Parenthood in that state, in that city. And that's exactly what they've done. And we see across the country, various cities, there's, billboards and such popping up that are drawing attention to the fact that women can get on Amtrak and travel to Carbondale, Illinois to get their abortion.
It's just remarkable, though. So Carbondale, Illinois, obviously it's a university town. It's where the Southern University of Illinois is located. And it actually is a blue town, surrounded by really a very red area of the state of Illinois. But Planned Parenthood, they've had an abortion clinic there since 1985, and now they have two, looking at possibly a third one in this little town of 22,000 people.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing in Southern Illinois, just in general, because Carbondale is not the only city that's experiencing this in the southern or central, even central part of Illinois, but you hear this argument from the left, from Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers, that we want to provide access to women in rural communities because they don't have that. And then when you see 3 clinics popping up in a single town, it sort of changes, it challenges their narrative that rural women don't have access to abortion services. And then you start to ask the question of what's really going on here, that everybody is trying to get in on the business opportunity that's happening in Carbondale or in Champaign or in Danville, Illinois. And I think, again, you hit the nail on the head. So.
Yeah, it's a moneymaker for them.
Absolutely.
So reading further into the article, I found it very interesting because they are very forthcoming about the amount of money that they're going to collect on every abortion. And I believe this was just for an abortion pill. And in fact, one of the abortion clinics that was cited in there say we only do abortions up to 12 weeks, which means that they're issuing people the abortion pill and then leaving them to literally travel back to their home, could be 7 hours away, on their own without any other sort of services provided. They just hand them a pill. It's $600. And in one part of this article, they basically say, look, in 5.5 months, we've been able to do 1,400 abortions. Well, that's $840,000 if you do the math.
Yep. Yeah, it's remarkable. And not only that, but, you and I were talking before we started, and Planned Parenthood put out a statement this week on a couple different things. They highlighted a couple of different, progressions in their numbers since the Dobbs ruling came out. One of those numbers, which I think is mentionable, is that they've had a pretty significant increase in the number of second trimester abortions that they're seeing in their clinics, specifically in Illinois. The reason that that's mentionable is they make 2 to 3 times as much once you pass that 10-week mark. And so that's something that I think, all you have to do is go to their website and you can see, okay, it's $600 for first trimester. After you pass that 10-week mark, you're looking at anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 for a single abortion. And women are traveling from all over the country. And that's exactly what they need, because they have to make up their bottom line. Planned Parenthood went from operating in all of these states. I'm pointing at a map that you sent to me. All of these states.
Yes, and we can put that map up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of these states, and now that revenue is virtually non-existent for them. So they have to find other ways to be making that money.
Well, the article is pretty comprehensive. It went on and on about that, but it also tells the personal stories of some of the people coming over. It opens up with the 26-year-old had never heard of a distant southern Illinois town, but it became the closest option. She cobbled together the money, found childcare, asked her brother for a ride, and set off early one morning to drive north across state lines to 22-person Carbondale. It was a 7-hour trip from her home in Tennessee. Blah, 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 blah. She already was raising 2 young children. She had split with her boyfriend. She was financially unstable from losing a job, and she could face health risks. So her solution was an abortion. So in every one of these cases that they highlight, it's an abortion of convenience.
Mm-hmm. Which is funny, because that's not the argument that they make.
No, that's not the argument they make at all.
The argument they make is this is a medical procedure that women need access to for their protection, for their health, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think it's interesting, too, because if you think that you're not paying for it, taxpayers of the state of Illinois, you are absolutely 100% paying for that. I mean, we've talked about this extensively, and just to repeat it, I mean, if you come in and present as pregnant, you are presumed Medicaid eligible without really any check on where's your residency,
right,
or what's your income level or any of that. It's a presumption. And we made that, Medicaid abortions are completely provided for by the taxpayers in the state of Illinois, no questions asked. Now, the other thing that's interesting in this new FY24 budget, they have allocated $18 million to create a hotline and training program to make it easier to get an abortion in the state of Illinois. So what do you say about that? I mean, we're paying for an $18 million hotline to make it easier to get an abortion.
Yeah, well, what I want to know is an $18 million hotline. Why does a hotline cost $18 million? But then in addition to that, I'm sure they're doing advertising in these other states. I'm sure that they're educating on, digital or whatever, what have you. Billboards. I know that they have billboards in Memphis right now. Again, this is their intention. Their intention is to bring women in from other states, and they have created this fail-safe in Illinois that they're going to, essentially save their business model that is now failing in the rest of the country and all of these other states where abortion has been banned. And they're going to try to make up that bottom line here in Illinois. And Illinois is happy to welcome their business.
It's actually the only, I can't think of another business in Illinois that has grown by, 25%, or in some cases 370%. I have that statistic somewhere in this pile of paper. Oh, yeah, here it is. Planned Parenthood's abortion clinic in Fairview Heights across from St. Louis saw a 370% increase in patients since the court ruling. So in 1 year, 370% increase.
Wow.
Yep. It was $600 to see the medical provider just to get the abortion pill, it says there. Oh, and apparently their credit card machine didn't work, so they had to go to an ATM. I mean, this article is pretty comprehensive. So anyway, there's another thing that's interesting about this. They also have a coalition, Midwest Access Coalition, helped more than 1,600 women as well. They had nearly 4 times the 380 clients that they aided in 2019. They also have something called, so there's another group actually that helps provide travel expenses to get your abortion. It's a nonprofit setup. I imagine it's funded by a bunch of liberal women. And it, a 680-mile round trip they talk about for one person who was coming from Texas was $150 in gas, $40 for food, and a room at the Best Western. So there you go.
Yeah, and the stories...
It's become a travel destination.
Totally. And the stories that around, obviously... There's not a lot of data on this stuff because in Illinois, it's not a required reporting state.
There's
So
not.
they don't have to report abortions. They don't have to report injuries. They don't have to report 911 calls. There's no way for the public to really know what is going on in terms of the numbers with the abortion industry.
But we do know in Illinois that our abortion clinics are not inspected.
Yes.
And that even if there were a death to occur, a coroner does not need to be called. It's not mandated at all.
Yep.
Law that passed in 2019 that you don't have to call the coroner in the event of a death.
Yeah, that's correct. They're not licensed. They're not inspected. They're not held to any medical or safety standards, sanitation standards, things that people just assume and take for granted. None of that. It's virtually back alley abortions that are legal in Illinois, because that's pretty much what we're looking at. But the anecdotes that we hear around women who, I was talking to someone from a clinic down on the southernmost part of the state, and they were sharing that they had spoken with women who had come across the border, it had been paid for by a pro-abortion charity or, whatever. They had come across the border, gotten to the abortion clinic, and then decided, I can't do this. I can't have this abortion. The pro-abortion nonprofit that sent them there will not pay for them to go home. So you're stuck now unless you get your abortion. And this is more than one instance of this we've heard. We've also heard stories of women along the Indiana border going into hospitals after they've received an Illinois abortion. They're on their way back to Indiana, and they're, going into the emergency room for hemorrhaging, perforated uterus, fetal remains still intact in their uterus, things like the infections. And these are things that are being reported, again, anecdotally by employees at these hospitals, that they're seeing an uptick in these things. But there's no way for the public to know. And there's like I said, no reporting requirements. There's no accountability at all for these abortion providers, because Illinois, there's no laws that they have to.
So what happened to safe, legal, and rare?
Totally. Yeah.
Not safe. Only legal in Illinois, basically, and other places, and
Right.
then and not rare, not
Totally
rare at
not
all,
rare.
not
Yeah.
safe, not rare. at
Yeah,
all.
and they're not even hiding that anymore. I mean,
No.
like you just read this article, none of these stories are quote unquote rare
No.
scenarios.
Every single one of the scenarios in there was, a single woman had a kid already or wasn't ready for a kid. And I mean, there's other solutions, quite frankly, and they just don't take them up. So I find that's really interesting. There were a couple other things that I thought was interesting. Let's look at the chart that we have on the state-to-state comparison of abortion across the state. So this came from the Wall Street Journal, which also, because again, it's the 1-year anniversary of the defeat of Roe, the overturning of Roe, and with the Dobbs decision. And you can see here in that chart, and the viewers can, if you're looking at it here, you can see Illinois is really just surrounded by states that have much stricter abortion laws. Many of those states have exceptions in their laws as well, though. Very few of them have strictly just a heartbeat law. I think Iowa went that way. But you can see why we have become the abortion capital of the Midwest here. But, the country's largely divided on this issue.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, all you have to do is look at the makeup of the states. And the abortion industry can say what they want about, people are, they can demonize the red states all they want. There's a reason why red states have been able to pass these laws. It's because there are people who live in these states who elected these officials who this is what they believe. These are their values. And to be honest, the majority of Illinois, if we're really being honest, would like to see limits on abortion in the state of Illinois. Unfortunately, the state legislature is sort of ruled by this reproductive health obsessed caucus in Springfield that, sort of comes from really Chicago, Cook County. And unfortunately, they're kind of holding everyone hostage in terms of our abortion policy.
Well, they're so extreme that they passed that bill, SB 1909, that family pregnancy centers are now at risk under the Attorney General's thumb. They passed that law essentially saying that, if we don't like the way that you're speaking, we're going to shut you down. So, I mean, they're not just pro-abortion, they're anti-life.
Totally. Yeah. And really they're anti-choice for women, which is the irony here, because the whole argument from the very beginning has been pro-choice. I actually heard someone say recently, if you pay attention, they've really stopped using that language, and it's because they don't want women to have a choice. They want abortion to be their only option.
Really good point. Okay, so an NPR article says that a growing majority of Americans support legal abortion in at least the early months of pregnancy. I think that we know that. I think that that's the case. I will say, though, that, many cases we have even I mean, we're right up there right now, at least in Illinois, with China and North Korea in the terms. So it's not rare again, and it's abortion on demand at any time. So yeah, maybe most of them support legal abortion, but they also support limits on abortion, and that's not talked enough. So 13% of survey respondents said abortion should be illegal in all circumstances, down from 22% when the question was first asked. So more people do want it to be legal. However, support for legal abortion wanes as pregnancy progresses. So that is true. The survey found a record high support for abortion access in the first trimester. So only the first trimester, but that's not how it is in the state of Illinois. It's abortion on demand at all the times. Now, this was interesting too. At the same time, there was a June Harvard CAPS/Harris poll that is a Harvard Center for American Political Studies and Harris poll, and here they talked about just where people are moving, what people want in a state, and it says more voters prefer to live in a state with a Republican-leaning slate of policies. So this Republican-leaning slate of policy, which I find is interesting. 64% of voters say they would want to live in a state that cuts taxes, encourages public charter schools, does not allow gender surgery for minors, something also the pro-aborts are involved in, and restricts most abortions after 6 weeks. So 64% of voters prefer to live in a state that restricts most abortions after 6 weeks. This is according to a Harvard Harris poll. I mean, I don't know that they're known to be, conservative outlets. By contrast, 66% of voters, including a majority of all parties, say they would not want to live in a state that has increasing taxes, restricts legal gun ownership more strictly, allows abortion up to 9 months, allows minors to get gender surgery without parental permission, encourages undocumented immigrants, and allows felons to vote. Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty mentionable. That's incredible.
It's a really important poll, and it's something that at least pro-lifers should hang their hat on. I mean, there should be a consensus building here, I think, in the state of Illinois. First steps first, right? We need to get back to parental notice of abortion. We need to try to put some limits in. We need to get rid of taxpayer funding of abortion. I mean, we're just happen to live in one of those states where there's a whole lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and I think the writing is on the wall in terms of, we see every year for the past 5-10 years that Illinois is in the top 10 states in the nation that are seeing high exit rates, that people are just leaving in droves. I'm sure you saw the news that there was a shooting the morning of, what was that, Monday, Juneteenth?
Yes.
At it was supposedly a Juneteenth celebration, but this shooting happens at midnight. 20 people are shot and 1 is killed. And this is just this paints the perfect picture of Illinois nowadays, that we can't even have a celebration of Juneteenth, whether you believe in that or not, without some kind of gun violence being associated with it. And that's what people see when they think of the city of Chicago. I mean, nationally, that is now the reputation of the city. So the question is, what is keeping people here? You and I both know people who are moving out of the state who had businesses here in the state. I mean, we've seen big businesses leaving Illinois, but that's not true for abortion. For abortion, they're just
on almost every sorry about that. On almost every aspect of public policy, we are in the bottom 5.
Yeah.
If it comes to, is it good policy or bad? No, it's usually we're in the bottom 5.
Yeah.
And it could be economic, it can be culture, it can be education, you name it. It runs the gamut. And so, you do have to wonder. I mean, we're here, we're in the fight here. We think that if we can come to some reason on policies that aren't egregious, then maybe we can make a difference. But that's not where the state is going. And so I wanted to close it out with this, because you did a really important national interview with NBC about another law that is a pro-abort law. I mean, it's not enough that we passed the Reproductive Health Right Act in 2019. That wasn't enough. No. We've got far more things to do. And so they passed a law in the state of Illinois that says that you cannot use electronic license plate readers to go after women who are seeking an abortion in the state. Let's play the clip, because I think it explains it pretty well.
If it feels like you are being tracked, it may be because you are at red lights, going in and out of the office, on your smartphone. But what if you could be tracked seeking a legal abortion simply by your license plate?
I don't think people realize how much of their personal data is collected, that their whereabouts are tracked.
That's why Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Janulius backs what he says is a first-in-the-nation bill to outlaw sharing or selling license plate data for women seeking abortions.
Who has access to license plate trackers?
A number of private and public entities have this personal, sensitive data.
Data he fears could be weaponized as some states try to criminalize helping someone get an abortion, even in a state where it is legal. 3 other states have passed laws aimed at protecting health data from such efforts.
When they travel, whether it's to an abortion clinic or the grocery store, we need to make sure this data is protected.
Illinois Right to Life Executive Director Mary Kate Zander opposes abortion.
Do you think this bill is necessary?
I think it's unnecessary. They're trying to create a narrative around what the pro-life movement may or may not be doing in this.
She says her organization is not trying to criminalize women seeking the procedure.
Is the Right to Life movement tracking license plates of women?
No.
Absolutely
not.
Has it done that in the past?
No,
Do you
absolutely
see it doing that in the future?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's just not a tactic that we would use.
With a quarter of their patients now from out of state, Illinois Planned Parenthood CEO Jennifer Welch is not convinced.
Patients need to know that when they come for health care, that information won't be shared with anybody, law enforcement, activists, anybody else.
Data collection and privacy, a new frontier in the nation's fight over abortion rights. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Chicago.
Okay, Mary Kate. So, I mean, national NBC calls you up. Are we the first in the nation with this type of law, or what's going on?
We are. This is like, the Secretary of State in Illinois kind of headed this up. He kind of saw this as his own initiative, and they've got a great little highlight of him in this piece on NBC. And it's interesting because there are a lot of bills. It seems to be that as time goes on, the Democrats in Springfield are coming up with more and more ways to incorporate abortion into their laws, that they're in their lawmaking.
Right.
And this was just not a law that we paid that much attention to because it's totally irrelevant to us. I mean, there are no pro-life organizations in the state, let alone, in the nation, trying to track women's license plates to criminalize them crossing state lines. I called a friend of mine who's an attorney and he's written laws that have been passed in Texas and some of these other pro-life states. And I asked him, have you heard of any state, any pro-life organization in the nation? And he was like, that I'm pretty conservative, but I can tell you that I have never heard of this. So the way that I receive it is they're trying to write a narrative about us. They're trying to write this narrative that we are going after women. We want them put in jail for pursuing an abortion. And, the things they don't show, how this goes with the media, the things they don't show in our conversation. I said to this reporter repeatedly, the only thing we want to do is provide women with support and resources so that they feel empowered to say yes to having their children. That is what we are seeking to do. And the state of Illinois has no interest in highlighting that at all. So I just look like a liar in the story, and that's what it is to deal with the media, when they sympathize with this stuff. So
no, it's just another stupid law that they passed. Just to virtue signal to their Planned Parenthood, personal PAC, all their big donors. It's like, look what I did now for abortion rights. You did nothing.
Yeah.
You absolutely did nothing. The only thing good about that report was the fact that he revealed how much that you're surveilled when you're out on the road. Everybody has this data, and private companies have your data. So, I mean, I thought from that perspective, that was good. But the idea that, first of all, everybody knows we don't have the resources as pro-life organizations to even try and collect this data, then track the data, then track down the woman. We wouldn't do that anyway. It's not what we want to do. We want to change hearts and minds around this issue and actually go back to. I mean, we're not pro-abortion in any way.
Right.
But safe, legal, and rare would be a start for us in the state of Illinois. Let's just face it. That would be a
Absolutely.
start.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's where we want to go.
And here's another thought for you on this license plate law, something that my husband is in law enforcement, something that he highlighted for me. He and I are having conversation about this Thursday night. I know I have to do this interview on Friday morning. And I said to him, what is that information actually used for? Like, think of a scenario that
Right.
that might be relevant to us. And he said, I can tell you when it's relevant. It's relevant when you've got a minor girl in a sex trafficker's vehicle, and we know that this girl is being taken into another state, and we want to find that car. He said, now this is potentially a conflict for us. And that, from our perspective, we're trying to protect these girls, and we've got, more obstacles being put up.
Well, that's a really good question. Did anybody in the legislature bring that up in the discussion of this bill?
It was brought up.
It was brought up.
Listened,
Okay.
This bill was actually discussed in the committee hearing. And I mean, first of all, some of the legislators pushed back, some of the pro-life legislators pushed back, not even from the perspective of a pro-life issue, but just in general, an issue of like, that is not how these systems work. And you're complicating law enforcement's ability to access data that they need to do their jobs. Of course, Illinois is not interested in protecting the police or helping them in any shape or form. But then,
Or no, they rather protect sex traffickers. Let's be honest with you, because the
100%.
whole idea of getting rid of parental notification was all about protecting sex traffickers.
absolutely.
So
Yep.
they talk out of both sides of their mouth. I wish that the media, the mainstream media, would just really ask them really difficult questions, and they didn't. And was that point brought up when you talked to NBC about this?
I brought it up to her.
You did,
I did.
that
And
was
I did.
cut from the clip.
She cut me off. She was like,
cut you off.
It was like her behavior around that topic was, I'm not even going to go there.
You're
with you."
kidding me.
Yeah, she
did
cut
not
me
want to
off.
have a conversation about that.
No conversation around sex trafficking. And so I'm from Joliet. I was born and raised in Joliet. Joliet is an industry town. It used to be.
Yes.
a very blue collar. You've got the river running through Joliet. You've got major, 80 goes through Joliet, 55 goes through Joliet. Joliet is a sex trafficking hub. That little intersection. And if you talk to the sex trafficking industry, or not the industry, but the charities that attempt to serve and rescue some of these kids who are being...
Yeah, it's the second largest inland port in the entire country.
Yep, like from Chicago down to Joliet, that's like a corridor of sex trafficking. You will never hear Democratic lawmakers talk about that issue, because what does that issue tie in? It ties abortion in with it, and it ties in all of the lack of restrictions with these clinics, that they just have no bar at all, nor do they really... I mean, can we know if they report... minors coming in with people who aren't their parents? I don't think we can know that. We can't know.
No, they've shut off all information. I think actually we got more information, probably prior to 2015 than we get now when you look at abortion statistics in the state of Illinois.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, hey, this was a terrific conversation. Thank you so much for coming in on this important week. It's actually a celebration for the pro-life movement. We overturned Roe. It finally got overturned. It's back to the states. But unfortunately, we live in the state of Illinois, where we have a whole lot more work to do. So if you want to get involved, you can go to the Illinois Right to Life website and sign up to volunteer and plug in that way. Thank you so much for joining us on this important podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.